Welcome to this episode of Vulnerable with my guest, filmmaker, former child actor, and advocate, Alexa Nikolas. I'm going to go ahead and just put a trigger warning right off the bat. We talk a lot about problematic things surrounding the culture of Hollywood and the recording industry and what she has survived. So please support Alexa. Please go support her causes. She's getting the word out about things that need to be discussed. And buckle your seatbelt for this episode of Vulnerable. Hi, Alexa.
Hi!
How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
Yeah, thank you for coming.
Thank you for having me.
Hell yeah.
I'm happy to be here.
Yeah, this
I'm
is
really
a
happy
really
to be
good a moment in time for a lot of voices, a lot of people that
agree.
need us to sit down and have this conversation.
I agree. I feel like the time has come. Like, it feels like things are brewing,
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah.
It really does.
There's so many people who want to help,
Mm-hmm.
but don't know how.
I agree.
And I think that the first step in all of this is organizing,
Uh-huh.
which scares
Number
people.
one. Oh, it scared me. It's a lot of work to organize.
Mm-hmm.
Organizing is probably the hardest part, I would say.
Mm-hmm.
It takes a lot of energy. Actually, I was telling my husband the other day, I was like, now I get why people don't really do this.
You're like, why change never happens? Yeah.
Because it's so much work. It's a lot of work.
Mm-hmm.
It's a lot of work, especially with the toddler too. Like, organizing e-predators has I'm like actually shocked that it's as organized as it is.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't think that was going to be as natural and organic as it's become, but it really just kind of has like a life of its own pretty much at this point.
Oh, wow.
That's what I feel. Like, it's like I make a decision, or I think I made a decision, and then something happens where it kind of leads me into a different place, and it's like the right place. Like with each protest.
Ah, yeah.
Like, I have to choose where I'm going, you know, and usually I'll pick a place, and then afterwards something will pop up, and I'm like, oh, I'm actually supposed to go over there. And it just kind of has a life of its own. Like, I've let go of the steering wheel, and I'm just kind of moving with it.
When you
instead
say
of trying to
something will
control
come
it.
up, you mean like permitting or like
Yeah, like
your
I'll-
just own choice?
Someone will come forward about something, or I'll end up, getting a DM from someone or find a new survivor, and it kind of will dictate where I'm going next.
Mm-hmm.
And so, and also doing round twos of all these protests, because I don't want them to think I'm going anywhere. It's really important for me to keep coming back, because I know they're going to ignore me and try to make me small for as long as possible.
Okay.
Until they can't anymore. Like, I know they're patting e-predators on the head kind of and going, oh, how cute, like a bunch of survivor girls like showing up in front of these big corporations, like how adorable, they'll get tired soon. And it's like, no, we're doing this for life. Like,
Wow.
we're doing this for life.
Yeah.
Like, I'll be showing up, as until they at least respond or do some type of change.
Okay.
With Warner, it was interesting. We went twice. Our second time we went, with e-predators, I've slowly figured out what to do with it. At first, I thought it was just going to be protesting. And then I thought, oh, maybe with the protest signs, I can actually educate my followers about what I'm protesting about. So we changed the format. So first it was just protesting, going live and showing survivors protesting. And then I went, oh, I can actually use the signs to inform people.
Okay.
And so once that happened, I had to go back to places, because that's not what I did prior.
So
And-
when you say change the pictures, I'm sorry, you mean like the graphics of the...
Correct. Yeah.
So
I
like-
started getting more creative with the signs themselves.
Yeah, I even remember them. Yeah. There's like the logo of the lip or something,
Yeah,
right?
e-predators. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's a really good friend of mine, Drew. He made that like in 5 minutes, which was so. I was like, I need some symbol for e-predators, and he sent that, and I was like, that's perfect.
amazing.
It was kind of wild, because e-predators sounds scary and edgy, but really it just comes from Eat the Rich. So that's what inspired it, and it's not, it's edgy. It's way more edgy than Me Too, in the sense of it's not just Me Too. It's like Eat Predators, but I also kind of find it fun. It's not, it doesn't take itself too seriously, which
Okay.
is so important for me personally. Dealing with other survivors, most of the time we're wallowing in a lot of our trauma and being triggered, and then having many good days as well. But for the most part, being a survivor is hard stuff. And so with the protesting, I wanted to make sure that it wasn't an experience that felt too heavy.
Sure.
Like, we're talking about heavy things, but I want survivors to feel empowered and actually find a community of also fun. And so that was super important for me with doing these protests, was to make sure that it wasn't taking itself too seriously.
I was going to say, how do you make a protest fun?
Yes, you theme it. That's what I've been doing.
Okay.
Well, I've been theming it a little bit. So with
Like,
Warner,
depending on each... Oh, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah. So Warner, this is so strange. So the director board member of Warner is the CEO of Mattel.
Okay.
And so when I found that out, I was like, oh, well, we can ask that board member to investigate WMG to see how many NDAs they've been spending money on and how many survivors want to be released from those NDAs. Now, with NDAs, the problem with them is NDAs about innovative, creative concepts is okay. Like, we see that time and time again. Like, please protect the script. Like, we don't want anyone talking about that.
There's a process of which you can go to, like, the WGA and you can register your concepts and your ideas.
Right.
You can trademark things.
Right.
There's a lot of protections in place for actual ideas and IP. This is not the same thing that you're talking about.
No, not at all.
NDAs are non-disclosure agreements, for those of you who may not know.
Yes.
They're things that are an item on the Eat Predators, like, I guess, mission statement, because it's a huge problem.
It is.
Okay.
Because they're super broad. And the problem with them being so broad is that crimes fall into them. So, like, sexual assaults, sexual violence in general can fall under these extremely broad NDAs. And I've come across survivors where not only are they not allowed to mention that there even is an NDA, but the NDA will say that they can't even speak to their therapist about it. So these companies are blocking survivors from their healing journey of their trauma.
Yeah,
And
that's
it's
crazy.
Crazy. I mean, to put that in.
But isn't the therapist, aren't they sworn by, like, legality? Like,
you can subpoena them.
Yeah.
So
okay.
if you get into a lawsuit situation, then the therapist, that's another thing that a lot of lawyers that are, representing alleged abusers, they really will go after the survivor's therapist as, like, a tool of harassment to make them scared of what's going to come out, what prescription pills have they been, prescribed to kind of try and make them look like they're crazy. So with these NDAs, since they're so broad, we have sexual assault, falling into these super broad NDAs. And they're so old school to the point where in litigation now in the state of California, you can't even sign an NDA about sexual harassment or sexual assaults. That's been done. But a corporation can still use an NDA about sexual assault in a work environment, as long as it's not litigation.
Okay.
So if, like, basically it's like pre-litigation, they call it, when you go to H&R and you're like, my boss or my, an employee sexually assaulted me or harassed me.
They say sign this?
Correct.
Okay.
They say sign this. And sometimes a survivor doesn't even have a lawyer present. They're feeling so pressured to sign it to keep their job. And
what do they do? What do they do after they sign it?
they get fired a lot of the time.
Oh, no shit.
That's the problem. Yeah, so I know a lot of survivors that once they sign the NDA, probably within like a few months end up getting fired. And they will pretend it's about reconstructing, the company.
Yeah.
And they'll be high top earners, and they will.
Will they even get a decent package? Or
they'll get a severance, but it's not like the same type of severance that these CEOs that are the abusers end up getting when they leave the company. It's like.
So, do survivors come to you like
Yes.
a lot of times? Do you have
times.
like basically survivors in your DMs like every day kind of thing?
I do.
Oh, that's horrible.
It's horrible. I didn't realize the immense issue when it came to sexual abuse in the music industry, just the entertainment industry in general, until I came forward about my abuse.
Sure.
And once that happened, I couldn't believe how many survivors there were. It was like thousands and thousands and thousands of survivors, men and women. And once I saw that with my own eyes, I could never unsee that again. Once you see it, you're like, we have a problem.
Okay.
And the biggest problem is survivors really feeling unsafe to come forward. And that's what I saw as the pattern, which was, this happened to me, but I don't feel comfortable coming forward. I don't want my family, to be embarrassed or ashamed or self-blame themselves, or I don't want my abuser's friends to shame me publicly.
It's like coming out.
It is.
It's like coming out and then you can't go back in the closet.
Correct. It's very similar. You get labeled as that. And the abuser, it's interesting, like the abuser doesn't get they talk about cancel culture, and it's always so funny to me because cancel culture is just an excuse of making it kind of this like, oh, cancel culture, making it a thing. It's more about, we don't want to financially reward anyone that abuses an individual.
Well, because we live in a system of oppression in a capitalist society.
Exactly.
And then the only thing that speaks is money.
Correct.
And
that's it.
That's the truth.
It is 100% the truth.
Now, in the case of child actors, I think that is where it gets really complex. So let's get into Dan Schneider. Trigger warnings aside, as I do in the beginnings of these, like there's some things that, we spoke before she came on, and I felt like we talked, and it was a very beautiful conversation of two people coming together with sort of like a shared experience. Me, not with Dan, but I think there's a lot of parallels, and I think we can use this time together to kind of just clear the air on what is, and like also maybe like what the crazy conspiracies that you've heard of people, like some of these like, oh, the Illuminati and like human trafficking, like all this other crazy stuff. It's like most of that stuff is not true. Yes. But the stuff that is true, we're going to tell you.
Exactly. So, and actually I feel like those conspiracies really most of the time end up blocking the truth because it gets so far over there that sometimes people can't really fully grasp the reality of it because they don't want to go into that, like, La La Land, like cuckoo land, basically. And so like they're afraid of getting into that space, and it's a bummer because it's like, it's not that, but it is this. And it's still just as important and heavy and valid. It's just not that.
It's not fantastical. Well, it's this whole thing of trauma porn.
Totally. That is such a thing. That is such a thing.
It's like, well, no, tell me how you were abused. And tell me. And I remember Allison Stoner coming on and talking to me about trauma porn. She's like, look, I don't want to talk about, like how I was this or that or whatever happened to me. Like, I agree. Like I just want to talk about advocacy. And she blew my mind with that. And like, I think she was a huge inspiration for me to start to really learn about what could be done. Right. And
instead of what's been being done.
Well, and I also think that as a whole, what you're doing as a part of this movement for advocacy, especially when it comes to minors as well, is it's so valuable. Like we were trading some texts, and I sent you something that Allison sent me, and it was like this web of the structure of change and what was the? Do you remember what it was called?
It was basically like all the different layers of like what you need to incorporate to make change. From protesting, like getting active.
Protesting was a big part of that.
It's major. It's old school, but it works.
But that's the thing is,
it's
like,
fun too.
So much of what you're doing is so important for us, people like Allison and myself, to start to have as a part of our team, because we can't do it. Right. Or you already know what you're doing. Right. And it's like change can really happen. And I'm starting to realize that. And of course, we'll start to talk about...
Many pieces, though, you need. Like, it's
like you're fearless. And like, I think a lot of people... So I posted something recently that was like, I'm realizing that there's been child abuse in Hollywood, and like I'm realizing I'm the only person that really wants to, not only person, but I'm the person that's going to step up to do something, right? Like in general terms. And I got a lot of comments where people were like, be careful.
Oh yeah, I get that too.
Oh, be careful. You're gonna get hurt. You're gonna disappear. Like I was like, what the
I get
fuck?
those too all the time. They're so strange.
It's like, are you trying to be nice? Yeah. Like, are you the problem?
Yeah, totally. True.
Like, doth protest too much, Like, why are you... It's just weird to me Like you want to stand for
agree.
something, and then like the weird stuff that comes out of that. But
because of the Illuminati stuff, I think they really think, I mean, it is dangerous, but I would say probably the way that these types of predators, enablers within the industry function is more with lawsuits. You're not going to end up in the back of a car, but you're going to end up with court documents against you. And that's abusive litigation is a real thing. And abusers, enablers really use that as a means of control, of silencing, of making a public impact that they're like taking this seriously.
Okay.
They're like, this is serious. This is not our company, or this is not who I am. And people forget that defamation suits, you can really put pretty much anything in a lawsuit for the most part. They're not as serious as people like to believe they are.
Okay.
Most of the time, they're stretching the truth a little bit. They don't have, like, for example, a really good friend of mine, Kaylee, who is a survivor, her abuser sued her for defamation and then lied a bunch throughout it, and then ended up offering her $80,000 because he lost, essentially. Because defamation is a hard thing to prove. I mean, with the Amber Heard, Johnny Depp thing, we won't go into that, but it's a hard thing to prove. You have to prove the person was malicious, knew that they were lying, and you have to have actual evidence of that. And if you don't have evidence of that, it's pretty hard. That's why the First Amendment is what it is. As Americans, we could say our opinion about something. We have the right to speak up. We're allowed to protest. Those are things that are rights that are,
that's true. People
wonderful.
don't realize that. People think
they don't.
People think of protesting as an un-American act.
Totally.
And it's actually quite the opposite.
It's very American.
I remember speaking to Jodie Sweetin and her kind of illuminating that for me. She was like, look, I have, this is a right that I have as an American, and we plan it, and we go through the right permitting structures, and everybody knows what they're doing. Right. You have to make a choice when you're protesting if you want to get arrested, not want to get arrested, but if you're going to do that.
Right.
And you're
What's the plan?
Yeah, right. I don't know if you've gone into that that side of it. I mean, is that something that you've?
I haven't been worried about being arrested yet, just because they're fairly neat and small right now. It's not a lot of people. It's hard to get people out during the day at 12 to 2, but I'm trying to make it lunchtime hours so
because
that
people the executives are leaving.
Exactly.
They have to see you, and they're going and they're having people come in and meet you. Interesting.
So I structure it that way. So like when meetings are coming through, like lunch meetings, they're having to come through the protest.
Yeah.
But at the same time, then the people within the building really, they choose not to leave, which is interesting. So
how do you know that?
Because no one will leave. Like, we won't see anyone come out of that building the entire time we're there, and it's lunch hours. And so we're like, oh, okay, they're telling everyone to be on like lockdown.
Really?
Don't go. Oh, totally.
So you're already making an impact.
I feel we're making an impact. For example, the CEO that we were just protesting about, he said he was going to step down in December of next year.
Oh, wow.
But then 5 days after our protest, he announced he's actually going to leave January 1st.
Okay.
And so we know that was what I guess a lot of activists like to call a bargaining tool. So they're starting to bargain. But that's not fully what we asked. We did want that CEO out of there, but also we wanted them to release the survivors.
Okay. From their NDAs?
Correct.
Got you.
Because we've gotten word that these survivors are asking to be released, and they're not being allowed to.
It wasn't something just passed now?
Yes.
Okay.
Wait, which part? With the NDAs?
The legend, not with the...
Oh, the adult statute.
Yeah, let's talk about that.
Yeah, so New York opens up November 6th, I believe.
Okay.
And then January 1st is California. And so
for which?
Adult statute. So basically, if you were sexually assaulted as an adult, the statute now is wide open. So it doesn't matter when it happened to you, you can seek justice now. Because usually it's 3 to 5 years, most states, for a survivor to be able to seek justice, which we know the average for a survivor to come forward with their trauma is 50 plus years. No one knows that. That's the average age of the survivor comes forward about their sexual assault.
Why is that?
I think it's societal. That's why I'm
Like
really,
what we were talking about, like it's like coming out of the closet.
Yes.
It's like, now this is my identity.
Yes. It's your identity. You lose your job over it. You deal with harassment. Like I call them the flying monkeys. That happens a lot. Like especially abusers in positions of power, they'll like hire these bot companies to harass the survivor.
Wow. That's ugly, man.
It's I mean, look what happened to Amber Heard.
Yeah.
That was the first time we saw it so publicly.
Yeah.
But that was a whole smear campaign.
Yeah.
That was perfect. Like that was so professionally done, by the way. It was like, whoa, this is like a full campaign against a woman abuser, which is like really interesting to see how society responded to a female abuser versus a male. I really saw misogyny there.
I think that we also saw a bit of this with the Olivia Wilde thing.
Yes, yeah, that's crazy.
Because like I don't see why we're still talking about this.
I agree.
I felt the same way about the Amber Heard trial.
I agree.
I think that part of the publicness of it, I think wasn't it like she was trying to keep it public so that people could bear witness to what was happening, or was it him doing it? Who is it that chose to make that so public?
Johnny Depp.
I see. So there was a strategy. There was a strategy for that. To kind of make people like him. And
oh my God, yeah. And they had it in Virginia instead of California. He filed in Virginia because the defamation laws are different there. He knew he had a higher chance of winning. And then on top of that, he knew in the middle of Virginia, he's probably going to have a lot of fans that are jurors. And so it was very strategically strategized. And for me, he's actually the reason why E-Predators was born.
Oh, is it really?
Yeah, he inspired me.
Oh, I thought E-Predators was around longer than him.
No,
in this
so
trial.
it's only 5 weeks old.
I'm sorry, what? So
it's only six weeks old.
Wait, Eat Predators.
It's only 6 weeks old.
You have made so much of an impact. So Jeanette McCurdy's book came out, and your protest in front of Nickelodeon
yes
went viral.
It did.
Okay, do you want to talk about that?
Yeah, it was like, first of all, with E-Predators, I was really only focusing on the music industry, because that's another thing when you're doing advocacy, you want to stay very targeted, because if you start to generalize, you can't get what you want to get done because you get overwhelmed.
Okay.
So I made a commitment to the music industry specifically because I am a survivor of the music industry.
Sure.
And so I never thought I was going to go to Nickelodeon. That was never on my radar.
Okay.
But when Jeanette McCurdy's book came out, and a lot of reporters were calling me and being like, Dan's in the book, and I was like, well, what exactly is said about Dan, in the book? Is she really coming forward about details of Dan Schneider? Because I felt like I was almost the only one who came forward in like 2018 about him, and no one really listened. And I didn't have a book, it wasn't like, I didn't have a PR, I didn't have anything like pushing it. It was just me on Instagram, so I get why it didn't go anywhere. But so I was shocked. And when I read it, it got me so upset. The NDA part is what really like upset me, is that they tried to silence her experience, and it was Nickelodeon. And from my own personal experience, I saw Nickelodeon enabling his behavior. Like,
okay.
I saw it personally. The execs were on set.
Okay, how did they enable his behavior?
They would watch him do things that should have been...
Like you're talking about the executives that were on the set.
Correct.
Because there's executives, there's the showrunners, like someone like Dan, who's not employed as like a corporate person. And then there's the corporate executives.
Correct.
Where usually there's one of them that's on set at all times.
Yes.
And they'll come through for like read-throughs. They'll come through for like periods of time. And then they'll also give notes. They'll come in for like, development meetings with Dan. And then of course Dan is there like 24/7 and all those things.
Unfortunately, he was there 24/7. But I would just see, like the wardrobe artist who was on set, she would be like massaging his shoulders in the tent and like regularly. And he would always have like, it was like females always massaging him in the tent. And I just remember always going back there where my chairs were, and he was just always being massaged by a female. And, it's kind of weird because you're like, well, why don't you just get a masseuse?
Yeah.
Like,
Hire
somebody on set
at a certain
for that.
Point. Like, I get if it's been a long day, it's a night shoot, and you're like, hey, you're my friend. Like, do you mind?
Right. Not
but you're
all
talking
the time.
about like all the time.
That's
weird. Yeah.
And then when I read in the Business Insider, expose on Dan Schneider, that was a common thing that was already mentioned in a lawsuit that he was mentioned in.
Okay.
And so I was like, oh, I remember that. And the execs would see that. They would all be sitting next to him and seeing all these female employees massaging him. Like,
Got it.
That's not.
Were they mostly male executives or?
A couple of females, like two
This
females.
old school Hollywood.
Yeah, totally. It's like all men. I feel like
Yeah.
men usually in these corporate structures use women in positions where, like HR, where it's like, okay, so when someone I abuse comes forward, they'll feel safe with a woman. So you'll see a lot of women put into positions of where the cover up kind of begins, in my opinion. Like that's really where they place them. They're like, place the women where vulnerable things are happening so that there creates a safety feeling, even though it's not safe at all.
It's got to be so hard to be that woman. I wonder what it's like to be the woman at HR that makes a survivor sign an NDA.
Horrible.
And manipulates them into doing that. That's really horrible.
It's really, I don't know how they sleep at night, because for me personally, when I think about these survivors, it's really hard for me to sleep at night.
Okay.
And I'm not even involved in like any of it. I'm not like, my personal story, but I'm not even personally involved, and it makes me deeply, upset.
How are you doing? I mean, I realize this is 6 weeks, but like that's got to be a really tough 6 weeks for you. You're a mom.
Yes.
Like you have things, you have lots of other things going on in your life, I'm sure. And like sort of self-sacrificing
a lot
to your, this is becoming your legacy, which to me is amazing. But at the same time, everything else that you've done or you're known for, it's all shifting now.
Oh, yes. Which I'm happy about.
Okay.
I'm actually
that's great.
Because so with my career, unfortunately, my career got put on hold because of my abuser.
Okay.
So unfortunately, he basically like forced me to go on tour with him at all times.
And when you say forced you, though, you were just like kind of isolated and...
Yeah, it was very manipulative. Yeah, isolated, super manipulative, basically telling me that since I've worked all my life, I deserve this break. It was that kind of manipulation. But then when I look back at it, I go, oh, interesting, how convenient for him. I was so isolated for most days out of the year, away from my family and friends, where abuse can really, be on full throttle because there's no one around. There's not even really many bystanders around to protect you or to tell you that something is strange. We only had one set of keys. We were only allowed to have one set of keys. And his excuse for the one set of keys was, doesn't it show like it's like a symbol of our love? We're together 24/7. And so
was that a red flag to you?
It wasn't.
Okay.
It was because you have to remember I was 18 with him.
Yes.
And he was 35. So 35. So he was so much older than me. And I think with child actors, we are kind of groomed into thinking we're not children. We're kind of treated as adults. And actually sometimes worse than like being treated as an adult. You're kind of like a machine. And so for me, I always kind of saw myself as older than I was.
Okay.
But then when I look back, I go,
you're
I was
mature
so
for your
young.
age.
Yeah, exactly. And everyone on set tells you that. So then you get an abuser.
You remember all your lines. You're so mature for your age.
Over and over and over. So when my groomer did the same to me, I was already groomed into that type of dialogue where I was so like, I've already heard that 1,000 times. It wasn't
It was
a red
Pavlovian.
flag.
It was like,
Totally.
I'm going to get rewarded with intimacy.
Correct.
If I just keep showing up and...
Correct.
Yeah. Sure.
And keep laying down.
Yeah.
And so that, I always say actually that my, childhood, professionalism actually created a very intense fertile ground for me to get groomed by my abuser.
I see.
I think they really go hand in hand.
Well, yeah. I mean, and speaking about the grooming and stuff with Dan and how people are going to be like, oh my God, conspiracies, we have to talk about this. So basically your experience with Dan Schneider was not positive.
No, not at all.
Would you like to share like some of the things like you were mentioning in our prep call? We talked about the wardrobe room, and then you mentioned about the wardrobe person who I guess was complicit in that kind of behavior. So, so you had mentioned that like Dan would be present at wardrobe fittings when you were 12?
Yes. Yeah. So there's like always like a curtain. It was like in the trailer. And there was always a curtain. And I remember he was so close to the other side that I could hear like the chair, creaking whenever I was changing. Like he would like move and shift, and I could actually just like hear it because it was right on the other side. And when I got older, I looked back at that and was like, oh, that's so weird. I don't remember any other creators in every single like wardrobe fitting.
Yeah, there's a reason there's Polaroids taken.
And he would ask for those Polaroids.
Yeah,
that
and
was
after they were
weird.
taken in the room.
He's like, so you're in the room and you also need the Polaroids. And I had to wear very, very short skirts to the point where I had to wear biker shorts underneath the skirts, and they had to cut the biker shorts because the biker shorts were longer than the skirts.
That's weird.
That was my everyday. And when you cut biker shorts, they start to like roll.
Yeah.
So I was always having to like pull. It was so uncomfortable. Like, just make biker shorts, like at least sew them on the bottom so I'm not having to constantly pull them down.
Yeah.
But that's how short the skirts were on Dan Schneider shows, where we were having to wear biker shorts underneath that had to be cut because biker shorts were too long.
Yeah, that's not cool.
No, we're talking 12, 13 years old.
Yeah.
And then so, that was a red flag for me. Him touching anyone on set is a red flag to me now, just because it was children.
The Polaroid thing too, though, that you mentioned about the dollar bills and stuff.
So yeah. So that wasn't even Polaroids, it was like a digital camera, and he would go around with money and ask to take photos of the kids' feet.
I'm sorry, yes, the kids' feet.
Yes.
The children's
feet.
Okay.
Yeah,
right.
their toes.
Okay.
And I remember thinking it was weird and silly almost as a kid. And I remember my mom going, don't go over there. My mom actually said no to it. But I saw other parents allowing their kids to do it.
Okay, so let's talk about being a parent, because now you are a parent. I'm a parent.
Yes.
Right? It's like we've got
we've got children now.
And so
Changes.
let's talk about these parents. So
yes.
Yes. What the hell, man? Like, where was Jeanette's mom? Like, where was everyone's like parents in this whole situation? And
yeah, so I think I think the parents are also groomed by society itself. Like, I think these parents, a lot of them are coming from small towns, some of them, like Florida, like outskirts, and they see fame and Hollywood has its own PR garbage that's attached to it. And I think these parents think it's just this big dream to be famous, to be wealthy, to have this power, and to come out of the situation that they personally grew up in, And so I think their intentions are mixed, where I think some of it is to give their kid what they think a better life, like have a dream, not be working a 9 to 5, at Starbucks per se.
Sure.
They're wanting their kid to actually do something with their life and not be stuck in that situation. So I think there are some good intentions with it,
okay,
but they don't even know where it's coming. They think it's their own idea, but I don't believe it is.
I see what you're saying.
You see what I mean?
So they're like, oh, I'm going to let Dan Schneider take pictures of my kids' feet because this is all jokes. That picture's not going anywhere. Like,
correct,
whatever. This isn't a big deal. They don't think about the implications of any of that. And then when it comes back to me, right, in what you were saying, like, child actors are groomed to be just to lay down. We don't have any control over our bodies and what is done to them or what is done to them on set.
Not at all.
So, for example, I remember that, Shia LaBeouf, had to be put in a vat of chili, and, he had, real chili. It was miscommunicated, and real chili was put in, and I guess he had, burns or something on his body. By the way, Disney felt horrible about that. And they made it right with his family, okay?
Right.
But, production is an adult it's an adult work environment.
Yeah,
and so
it is.
adult level stakes are that high, where it's like, oh yeah, I got injured on my work, so you got workers' comp for that, right? That's again the union type stuff.
Right.
Where it's like you need that representation and you need those checks and balances. The problem with these child actors is that there's not any kind of checks and balances.
None.
Who's gonna check balance? The teacher?
Yeah, not at all.
The set
teacher
teacher
doesn't do
who's
anything,
out to
by the
lunch
way.
and completely underqualified.
That is so the truth. The teachers were the
Hate-
most like bystander, like horrible enablers.
And
I've
clicky,
ever
right? You
seen.
told me that
Super.
yours was really clicky.
With the
once
lead.
you so now like
Looked out for her more than us, like more than me.
But let's start talking about the parental thing that we were talking about and how the set dynamic started to come into play for you.
Yes.
Because I know that you had said that like also too like when Jeanette came onto the scene of the show, like set dynamics started to get even more complex. She was like called Dan's favorite or something. Like,
yes. I mean, I feel like when it comes to these set environments, again, especially
just
with
as bad as
Nickelodeon,
high school.
They are. They're just
as
actually they might be
bad.
worse a little because there's more power
because there's adults
dynamic.
involved,
Yeah,
and it's like y'all
exactly.
should know better.
Totally. Like, where are the adults and why aren't they doing anything at all? And they're not doing anything. And what's weird about it is like when I look back, I'm like, this is so strange that none of them in the future has written their own book or expose of what they witnessed. Like, why is it all on the survivors to constantly expose, you know, this type of behavior? Like, none of them has had a revelation moment where they woke up and went, huh, I saw a lot on that set that I don't feel comfortable with. Like, really? None of them? Like, you only hear it from the survivors. I always find that so interesting. Like, no execs
Yeah, it
has
sucks.
ever written a book being like, this is what I saw and what I experienced.
Yeah.
You know, I find that so...
Well, you know why, right?
They wanna keep working?
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, 100%. Because
wanna
they're
keep
journeymen. And they
Right.
even call it their journeyman hours. Like I remember
Right.
the makeup artists and the hairstylists, they have to do a certain amount of hours so they can get benefits from their union. You know, IATSE, they all want to just keep working. So I think like they are
That's so scary.
And you know, it's like
That's
anytime
really
you
scary.
talk to somebody who's worked on certain sets, like the more I'm just, you know, just talking about the advocacy concept.
Yeah.
I'm not trying to whistle blow. But like I am talking about the bigger issues. And so people will come up to me and be like, oh my gosh, like I know so much, right? Like it's like, oh, just ask me. And it's like, okay, well, no, we don't need you anymore.
Right.
We're going to take care of it ourselves. Because you weren't there for us,
At all.
but we'll be there for the younger generations.
Definitely.
And
Especially as a parent now, that's one of the main reasons I'm doing what I'm doing is because I want my daughter to, and all kids to like walk into, you know, workplaces in the future. I'm hoping that they're not working, you know, they're not working when they're young, but if they are, I'm really hoping that these environments are safer and more protective than when I was walking into these industries.
I want to say this. So, like, all this stuff's coming out about Dan Schneider, who, by the way, I've only met, like, in passing, and I got a creepy vibe. But,
yeah. I mean, his presence is you feel it. I mean, everyone says that, actually.
yeah. But, I mean, it was very small moment in time, and I just kind of felt like...
Where'd you meet him?
I think it was, like, I don't know. It was, like, some event or, like, City Walk or, like, something really random.
Totally City Walk.
And I remember him was like, hey, Christy, or something like that, where he, like thought... It was almost like he knew me, and I was like...
No.
Yeah, no, I don't know you. You're Nickelodeon, I'm Disney.
Yes,
like, it was that
totally.
mentality of, like...
Totally.
But when we...
That's hilarious. Like West Coast, East Coast,
I don't
like
know, man.
school.
It was a weird time.
It was a weird time.
But even that's weird, dude. That
Yeah.
that the Nickelodeon kids weren't like allowed to like be friends with the Disney
Yeah,
kids.
agreed.
Because God forbid we share our work culture together and have something in common with.
That's
the
what
kids.
happened to me when I left. So when I asked to be released from my contract, Nickelodeon was first like no, and then my mom said, "Well, this can get legal."
Okay, so your mom advocated for you.
Oh, my whole life. My mom is my best friend. She even like some flaws that have happened.
Sure.
She has the good of her totally outweighs any like small
she's
thing.
human.
She's human.
Yeah.
And she's a single mom. And she really, really tried her best. But when they called to release me, they said, okay, we're releasing Alexa, but we have one request. And I was like, what? And they said, your daughter's not allowed to come to the Kids' Choice Awards or any Kids' Choice Awards after. And I remember hearing
And
it
how
and
old
going,
were you?
I was 13. And they punished me.
Because you left the show?
Correct.
Okay.
But what I realized was they didn't want me associating with any of the co-stars about my work environment experiences. They were trying to outcast me, which they always do.
Hold on, so
you're right.
you quit the show because of you were uncomfortable?
oh, I got abused by Dan Schneider in an exec room.
Oh, but sorry. Wait, what?
Yeah.
I didn't know about that.
Oh, that's in my live. I mean, that's in the slime time.
Okay.
Yeah. So
would you tell me this story?
Yes,
would you like to? I want you to feel comfortable that you can say
I could say like a smaller piece of it.
Okay. Because I thought it was just the creepiness and the like what we talked about. So this is actually new.
Oh, okay. Yeah. No. I was like I quit the show because of the Dan Schneider abuse.
Wait, what happened?
So do you know the Britney Spears story?
No, I don't know any of this stuff.
Wait, this is amazing. I'm like filling you in. I'm filling you in. There's a lot.
Okay.
There's a lot.
I'm here for you. So if you feel like sharing it, share it. But
okay.
If you don't. Okay.
So basically what happened was we know for season 1 and season 2, there was problems with me and Jamie Lynn Spears.
Okay.
So
wasn't your characters like, weren't they supposed to?
Friends.
Oh, okay. All right.
They were supposed to be best friends and we weren't in real life because
I hate that, yeah.
it was so uncomfortable. And unfortunately, the culture of the bullying from Jamie became kind of normal on set for everyone else to participate in.
Yeah.
So it was
trickle down,
totally. And so I felt very isolated.
Yeah,
and not invited to any of the gatherings purposefully. Left out at lunchtime, wasn't allowed to sit with anyone, told I was too nice, I smiled too much, am I an alien?
You were 12 years old, dude.
Yeah, I was 12. It's like, of course I'm like a nice, but like whatever, that's my personality.
And your mom did get into it with producers, right?
The whole time. So through season 1, so they ended up letting go of the character Dana because she was abusing, like verbally bully style mode person. And it was like very, very uncomfortable. And at one point she even like pushed me into a rock. And it was like, okay. That's it's time for everyone to talk. Okay. And so my mom had a conversation with them, and I guess they ended up letting her go. And so in season 2, we had a new character, Victoria Justice.
Oh, okay.
And so I was like super stoked.
Yeah, she seems
about
sweet.
Victoria. She ended up not being sweet at all.
Oh,
but
boy. Okay.
It was like layers. So she.
What the hell, man?
It was really bad. I was so excited because her mom dated my uncle, like in college years.
Wow.
So when she was auditioning for it, my uncle called us and was like, oh my God, Victoria's auditioning for Zoey 101. I was so excited because I had no friend on set. And so I thought this is an unbelievable opportunity for me now to have a friend on set. And so I went to the testing and I read the lines with her at Nickelodeon, and her and I like hit it off. Like we were like best friends at first sight kind of thing. And I was like, oh my God, season 2 is going to be so much better than season 1. Like this is a new era. I'm going to have a friend on the show, and I can just look, it's the past. Everything else is the past now. And we were best friends for most of that season until one day, I think her and I ended up getting like in a tiff.
Okay.
About a boy, but it was a very very mundane argument. It was like girls. She was upset about something about a boy.
Okay.
And so I thought we were going to be fine the next day, but I show up on set and I open the makeup trailer, and Jamie's sitting in there and Victoria's standing. And the entire second season, Jamie never spoke to Victoria once because she was friends with me. So that entire season, Jamie did not feel the need to go towards Victoria since her and I were best friends. She had nothing to do with me, kind of.
Okay.
As much as possible, she just stayed away. So I walk into the trailer and they're whispering to each other, and they turn around to me and laugh. And I'm like, oh, no, no, this isn't happening again.
Yeah, that's horrible for you.
This is not happening again. So it was pretty triggering.
Yeah.
And I was like, okay, Alexa, you're just back at square one again. Just kind of put your head down and don't cry about it, because every time you cry about it, execs get mad at you. And so just work, and not say anything.
Okay.
And so it just got progressively worse. And my mom then had to go again to the execs and say, hey, this is a problem again.
Yeah.
Unfortunately,
Yeah.
Alexa's still put in this situation. The culture is not okay
Yeah.
on set.
Yeah.
They did not care. They said, this is not called Nicole 101. It's called Zoey 101, and she has to suck it up.
Okay.
Literally just told me that straight
This
up.
sounds very, this is very industry standard stuff.
Totally.
Yeah.
It was just like, nope, no problem.
Yeah, you can
Don't
be
problematic.
replaced. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
That's what I felt like. And so you want to keep your job, and so you're not saying much. So anyways, fast forward, it's our last day for season 2. And as per usual, the talent coordinator comes to the trailer, knocks on the door, tells my mom he's bringing me to makeup and hair, and I walk over to makeup and hair. As I'm walking to makeup and hair, he looks down, I remember, and says, actually, Jamie and Brittany want to talk to you in the trailer.
Oh, boy.
And I went, and Brittany's an amazing person. She has apologized to me personally.
Oh, wow.
Britney Spears apologized, but Nickelodeon hasn't. Isn't that funny? Yeah.
Wow.
Britney Spears apologized and not Nickelodeon.
What happened? I'm so invested.
It's so fucked. It's so fucked. So I go, Brittany, and I'm thinking to myself, maybe Brittany wants to step in and mediate. Like, this is so great.
Was your
like
mom with you?
Ian, the talent coordinator, lied to my mom, said he was bringing me to makeup and hair, and then brought me to Jamie and Brittany's trailer without her knowledge.
I will cut somebody.
Yeah, that's how I feel. It's horrible.
I will cut
so
somebody.
no one knew. Can you imagine if our kids like got taken somewhere we didn't know, and then something horrible happens? Mm-hmm. And that's why I was trying to explain with the Slime Time Live, like, what if it was a predator in the room, and you're not telling? You need to tell the parent at
What
time.
is the Slime Time Live?
That was my live that I did to Nickelodeon, my protest.
Yes, that's what I
called
thought.
it Slime Time Live.
No, that's what I thought it was.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay,
exactly.
I thought that was something else, though.
No, same thing.
Okay,
Same thing. So that's what I was trying to say is, like, what if it was a predator in this trailer and not Britney Spears and Jamie? And even with Britney and Jamie, it still was a dangerous situation. So it's like child endangerment, truly.
Yeah.
And so I remember being kind of nervous, but also kind of being hopeful because you're a kid and it's Britney fucking Spears and you're just wanting everything to go away and you're hoping that she's going to come and save the day. Like, your pop icon's going to come and like make things better kind of. And so I remember walking up into the trailer, and as I opened it, I remember turning to my right to say something to Ian, and he was disappeared. So he left me there.
Okay.
He left a 12-year-old, 13-year-old there. And he's a talent coordinator.
Okay.
And so when I open the door, I see Jamie run to the back of the trailer. Like, she just runs. And I'm like, that's fucking weird. And Brittany goes, come on in. And so I come in, and I remember the door got locked. And I was like, that's weird. And all of a sudden, she just started yelling at me.
Okay.
Like, full
She took it back
blown.
to, where is she from? Louisiana?
She's from Louisiana.
She took it back to Louisiana. She's like,
she's like, this is time
well,
for
think
me to
about how
defend my
she
sister.
was, and she was probably just trying to be protective, but no, yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
It's like either way, it wasn't okay because I was a 12, 13-year-old.
Yeah,
but
yeah.
in retrospect, knowing the dynamic that was at place for her, it's like, of course that's what ended up happening. And
yeah.
oh my God, poor
You were like,
Brittany.
yeah,
no,
right?
but seriously, like, she's in a horrible situation there. And she was like 8 months pregnant, so she was hormonal too. And I remember she was rubbing her belly while she was yelling. And it was like she was trying to calm herself. And you could just tell it was very unhinged in a way that felt like someone was manipulating her. And I see Jamie back there, and she's afraid to come up, but she's letting her sister do all of her perpetuating the abuse again, but now with her sister.
Okay.
And so I start crying, and the entire trailer is just spinning almost at this point because I look up to Britney Spears, and that was scary. And I have an adult screaming at me saying, I'm never going to work in this industry again, she told me.
Okay.
And it's Britney fucking Spears. And so I'm sitting there just in shock, and I go, I'm going to puke. Like, I just knew that I was going to throw up.
Okay.
And so I started saying it, trying to say it out loud, and I was like getting her to like move out of my way.
Okay.
And I went to the door, and I had to unlock it, I remember, frantically, and then I stepped out and I puked. Mm-hmm. And I remember just running to my trailer. Now, you have to remember now, I come barging in. My mom thinks I'm at makeup and hair. Mm-hmm. And I come barging in, screaming, crying, throwing up, and I'm in fetal position in the bathroom in the trailer. And so my mom is like, what's going on? What's wrong? She's freaking out.
Yeah.
But I can't communicate to her because I'm in a trauma flight mode,
Yeah.
And so I'm just trying to communicate, but I can't, and I'm puking. So she like opens the door and screams like, where's this teacher? Where is Dan? Where's anybody? Again.
Not answers to the problem.
Exactly.
Okay.
You're like, what the fuck's happening?
Yeah.
And so she's screaming. I remember watching my mom just screaming, and it took 10 to 15 minutes for anyone to show up. Mm-hmm. So no one shows up, and I'm just sitting there. My mom's trying to get me to say what happened. She thinks she doesn't know what happened. So she's freaking out. She's like, I thought you were in makeup and hair. And I'm like shaking my head, telling her, no, I wasn't at makeup and hair. And she's like, where are you? And then all of a sudden, I hear the knock on the door. Still no teacher. The teacher's with Jamie, protecting her.
Okay.
And so the door knocks, and I see Dan Schneider come in. And he comes in, and always, his what now? You know, like I'm the problem again. We've already told you to stop crying and we've already told you to shut up. And you're not shutting up again and you're fucking up our hours and our money and our time, you know? And so he comes in, he's looking down at me, I remember, and he's like, what? You know, what happened? And I then was able to say, I said, Brittany yelled at me, Ian brought me into the trailer, and they told me I'm going to lose my job. Like, Brittany told me I'm going to lose my job. And Dan looks at me and just looks annoyed, and he steps out. And then he comes back 5 minutes later with a DVD player. You know those DVD players that used to have, like, the screen that pops up?
Yeah.
He comes in with that and he goes, here. He goes, will you go back on set now?
That is so weird.
Yeah, and there was 2 other execs with him who just flew out from New York that happened to be there for the last day of shooting.
Okay.
And so they're behind him, watching him hand, I'm in fetal position. I mean, there's not even makeup on me anymore. I mean, it's like I was really deeply distressed. And he's like, you need to go back on set. And my mom goes, are you fucking kidding? Like, my daughter's not going back on set. And he goes, she has to. We literally have like 2 hours till sundown. She has to go on set. And then we can talk about this at Nick on Sunset. But we have to do this now. And I remember looking around and going, wow, nobody cares about what's happening to me.
Okay.
And I don't feel protected. And I don't feel safe. And I'm scared. And now I have to go back on set, pretend nothing happened, and be around those who did it to me.
Okay.
So I get back on set, and unfortunately, Jamie and Victoria were like laughing at me, and then we had water guns, and they started squirting the water guns at me,
Oh,
even
Jesus
when it's
Christ.
not action. Yeah.
Oh, Jesus Christ.
Yeah, on top of it. And so I just came onto set, and I'm like, okay, and I'm just having like, don't cry, Alexa. I just remember telling myself, it's just horrible, you know, like you look back at it, I'm just like, this is so abusive, and no adult was doing anything. And I'm sitting there having to tell myself, don't cry, don't bother anybody, you know.
Dude,
and so I get off.
Trauma. Big trauma.
Yes, big trauma. And so then, like he said, we'll talk about this at Nick on Sunset.
Okay.
So after we got off set, we get a phone call from Nickelodeon, or from my agent through Nickelodeon, saying, come tomorrow to Nick on Sunset. Dan will be there and the execs to talk about this, to mediate. So I'm thinking, once again, I'm going into a safe environment. I'm thinking, okay, hopefully this time people actually care. Something's going to happen. We're finally actually having a conversation at Nick on Sunset. This will probably be good, right? No. So I show up there with my agent and my mom. And I remember I was sitting next to my mom, and there was there, and I was crying because it was a very upsetting. I was worried about losing my job, you know. And she looks at me and she's like, "Why are you always crying? Why are you always crying? If it wasn't for me, you wouldn't get this role." So I see Dan Schneider, and they are looking at me and go, "You know what? Since Alexa's so upset, maybe we need to have her in the room without her mom." And they go, how about you step out so we can just have a calm conversation where Alexa can tell us exactly what's been going on, and we can talk this over, but without having her parent there making her feel emotional. Like, basically shifting blame onto my mom as a tactic to get me in the room alone.
Crazy.
So my mom didn't believe. My mom was like, fuck no. So she goes out, calls the lawyer. Now the lawyer's in cahoots with Nickelodeon. So they do tons of deals with other actors.
Your entertainment attorney?
Yeah.
So, oh boy, this really does go pretty deep.
Yes.
So your entertainment attorney that you hired, how did you originally get your entertainment
Through
attorney? Oh boy.
She wasn't advocating for me. She was like, you know, she was even telling my mom, we don't want to look problematic here.
Yeah,
like,
okay.
We're getting into a situation where we're now at Nick on Sunset, and we have to like basically wheel it back.
Okay.
And so I'm hearing that. My mom calls the lawyer. The lawyer's not there, which I know why she's not there, because she doesn't even want to be there, because she's working with them, you know?
Yeah, okay.
And so it's a conflict of interest, because she has so many clients that are working at Nickelodeon that she wants to make sure they're protected. You know, it's like horrible.
Okay.
So she says to my mom, hey, you've let Alexa in the room alone with them multiple times. Like, think about auditions.
The lawyers?
Yeah.
Okay.
So she's like, you've been in auditions before. You can go in. You're gonna be fine. Like, don't be paranoid. Basically, they can't do anything to her in there. You know, that's kind of was the vibe. And so my mom looks at me and goes, "Can you go in there?" And I went, you know, what the fuck? I'm so traumatized. I don't even know what's going on. And so I go, okay. And I remember going in, and it was just like a long, like exec table,
Sure, yeah,
with like bunch of black chairs there and then a bunch here, and I'm sitting across from like 5 Nickelodeon execs.
And you're 13.
And I'm 13.
Okay.
And I'm crying still. You know, I'm like upset. I'm like just scared.
Well, you're
freaked out.
Yeah.
And so I remember Dan looks at me and goes, "Do you understand that it's called Zoey 101 and not Nicole 101?" And I just remember him like, it was so stern. And I was like,
what does that have to do with anything? Yeah, okay.
I have no idea, but it was that was their whole spiel. Was like, it's Zoey 101, not Nicole 101. It was like their slogan or something. It was just like,
that's
okay,
not helping. Not at all. That did not age well.
It doesn't age well.
No.
And it's also kind of it's stupid. It's like,
it doesn't make any sense.
And it's like, okay, we know that.
Okay, moving on.
Yeah, exactly. Like, cool. Facts. Yeah. Like, thank you. But like, that doesn't solve anything. So I'm like sitting there and he goes, we cannot have this happening anymore on set. Like, we just cannot have it happening anymore.
No, I agree.
Like,
what are you going to do about it? Adults?
Yeah, totally. Adult present.
That makes a lot of money off of me.
Totally. It's like, hello.
Man.
So then the girl, the woman to his right, I remember her just saying, and if it wasn't for me, you wouldn't have had this job. Mm-hmm. And so basically making me feel that if I upset her, I'm going to lose the job.
Yeah,
it was
of
like
course.
that kind of,
I mean, let's be real. You already lost the job.
I did.
They were going to try to take you out of the equation as fast as
possible.
And that was hard because the fans really loved you. So
weird dynamic.
Yeah.
They're in a weird situation. I'm in an awful situation. They're thinking money and I'm thinking pain and like, how do I survive this kind of, And so I started crying and I said, I really don't want to be a problem for anybody. Mm-hmm. And I was like, I don't want anyone to not like me. And Dan was like, no one likes you.
Oh,
he just screamed.
This just keeps getting worse.
Yeah, it's horrible.
Oh my God.
And I just went,
oh, God.
Okay. And I remember getting up and I was like, I got to get out of here. And so I ran out and I just went to my mom and I said, I never, ever, ever want to go back on Nickelodeon ever again.
Okay.
And my mom said, okay, I'm going to protect you. Like, we'll get out of this together.
Okay.
And so my mom called. We left at that point.
Oh, boy.
She was there about all of this.
Okay.
Which is so scary. And she was pressuring me to kind of put it under the rug.
Yeah.
And so anyways, fast forward, really didn't want to call to release me from
many different clients with this particular.
Correct.
No one's primarily focused on your mental health. So
correct.
That is what it is.
Correct. No one cared about my mental health whatsoever.
Yeah.
When that's why I had my protest sign saying Nickelodeon didn't protect me.
Yeah.
And that's just really how I felt at the end of the day was, I know people are going to focus on Dan Schneider, but really the accountability lies with Nickelodeon because enablers, abusers, predators, whatever you want to call these individuals are going to come and go. But what lets them and allows them to perpetuate the abuse are these institutions that enable and protect them.
Okay.
It becomes a safe haven for abusers. And they don't see any accountability. Actually, they see them getting rewarded and usually the victim getting silenced and punished. So when that dynamic's constantly happening, you're never going to get rid of abuse.
Well, when you don't disrupt the protocol,
right?
By inserting someone who is primarily interested in protecting the mental health of a minor, then you're not playing fair.
No.
And what you're actually doing is you're creating an entire generation of traumatized people who've lived through the hands of this that are able to organize and disrupt the protocol.
Right.
So you either get on board, or you're going to be called out.
Right.
Because Me Too was its own movement.
Right.
But there's other things that could happen. And
they are.
I mean,
they are happening.
These types of protocols who were created by people who have now retired, by the way.
I know.
They're not going to affect them.
Right.
But I do feel hopeful, okay? But what would like grown Alexa do? Like, what would you say to your 12-year-old self? Is there any advice that you would give to her?
Yes.
Because there probably is a 12-year-old Alexa out there right now.
Yes. I mean, I've thought about this a bit. Probably number one, I would say get up and off the set. Like have agency over yourself and remember it. Remember your rights. Even though kids don't really feel like they have it, they do.
They do.
They can get up and leave.
Oh, yeah.
And they can have a tantrum if they want to. You can just be a kid. Be a kid, you know? And so number one, I would say to myself, it was okay to get up and leave. You didn't have to go on set. No one had no one had a gun to my head. And I didn't feel like it was a violent situation where I literally, couldn't leave. I could leave. But no one made me feel that I could leave. No one let me know that.
Yeah, that wasn't an option.
It was not an option,
Yeah.
but it was.
Yeah.
I mean, technically, I could have done it, but nobody was letting me know that was an option. So I would tell myself, you have that option. Like, you always had that option. Don't listen to the adults around you.
Okay.
Listen to yourself. If you're feeling uncomfortable, it's time to get up and say, I need time.
Yeah.
Like, I need time, and no, I don't want to be on set right now, and it's a no for me. Okay. And I just think that would have helped me so many times in my life of just like not just getting up and actually physically leaving the space and saying no means no.
Yeah.
I don't want to be treated this way, and I'm not going to be treated this way.
Yeah.
But no one taught me that, and so I would love to tell the 12-year-old girls out there that they do have the power, or the boys, you have the power.
Boys too. Absolutely.
Boys too.
Yeah, absolutely.
Boys too. It's like,
oh my gosh.
you can say no means no. I'm not going to be treated this way. I'm not going to stand here and be treated this way, and I'm leaving the set. And it's on you.
Yeah.
You fix the problem if you are so worried about time and money. Fix it. Don't put it on the victim. Don't put it on the person who's struggling. It's on them, So that would be number one. Number two, I would probably tell myself, that when you become an adult, you're going to realize there is a community that understands you.
Okay. Because you felt so alone.
Yes. And I think a lot of kids do feel being a kid is weird.
Being a child actor is actually very, very isolating.
So isolated. You're not like the other kids. You don't feel
You're
not
all being
adults.
competitive with each other, whether you say it or
horrible.
not. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
It's horrible. I would
It
see
doesn't
moms
have
like
to be
counting
that way.
lines. It doesn't.
Yeah.
So I would tell myself, even though we all feel isolated in those situations, there is a community that actually cares. You just have to find it, and the way of I feel finding it is actually speaking up. I think that's where we find, like, I wouldn't be here today if I didn't do, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, that's what connects us. That's
Yes.
what connects us to our community, is sharing our stories so that we can share our stories with each other and change, what we need to change.
And honestly, like, this is about progress.
Yeah.
And if somebody's standing in the way of progress, they're a predator.
That's what I say.
So don't stand in the way of progress.
Nope.
And
No, don't prey on progress.
yeah, that's all.
Yeah, it's like, it's pretty simple too. It's like, but
It's
not
like
for
you
them.
don't wait.
They're
You
gonna
don't
make it.
want to help kids. Wait, you do want to see child
Do
actors
you
burn out and have drug problems and.
I mean, look at every child star that we grew up around.
Yeah.
I mean, I struggled hard.
Not
Eating
a
disorder.
not a single person that I know hasn't had
A normal.
a heart. Well, I know a few, and you know who those people were people who had really great parents, and they had really great perspective. They're very few and far between.
Right.
But
I haven't met many either.
But the majority of them really could have used an advocate, is all my point is.
I agree.
And we're going to change that, or we're going to work towards understanding what to do. And,
How to
it
do
doesn't
it.
need to be a scary thing.
No.
And I really, really thank you for coming and sharing.
Thank you.
Do you feel okay?
I do. I feel good.
We need to support you. Where can we find you and everything?
Thank you. Oh, you mean like social media?
Yeah,
wise?
like where can we support your,
So Eat Predators, Instagram, and then Match the Source is mine. So I kind of use both of them to give information. So I would follow Eat Predators or Match the Source. And if you can, donate to the Patreon would be nice, because that's what helps get us water and SBF and car rides for the survivors to be able to attend. the protest and also helps with the sign making. And so it really helps our movement. And so there's like many different, there's a scale of what you can donate to Patreon. That's also a great way of helping us out because it's hard.
Awesome.
It takes a lot of organizing.
Well, keep doing what you're called to do and finding your voice. And thank you for everything.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for having me. I love this reunion.
Yeah.
It's
like
cool.
a long time. She played
coming.
baby Red. Yeah, and here she is, all grown up. I'm so proud of you.
Thank you. Your younger self.
Yes. Very cathartic. I'm talking to my inner child about my, very cool.
That's hilarious.
Thank you, Alexa.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you for having me.
Yeah.